Hi folks, I'm going to show you how to deploy JBoss EAP on Azure RedHat OpenShift using the Azure portal. This is part one of a two-part recording. In this part, I'm going to deploy the infrastructure, including RedHat OpenShift. And in part two, we're going to set up an application that connects RedHat OpenShift to a MySQL database and runs a simple Jakarta EE application. So the first thing you're going to need is some prerequisites. You're going to need an Azure subscription. Portal.azure.com is where you go for that. If you don't have one already, you can sign up for free there. You're also going to need a Red Hat developer subscription. You can get a Red Hat developer subscription for individuals through the links. Everything I'm showing here today is on aka.ms/jbosseap on ARO. So please do follow along there. There's a link there for setting up your Azure subscription and also your Red Hat developer subscription if you need it. If you already have those, great. The next thing, you're going to need to get a Red Hat pull secret. And the Red Hat pull secret is used to pull from a hub the latest version of Red Hat to deploy on Azure. There's instructions in that quick start that'll tell you all about how to do that. It's a very large file that you'll download, and we'll use that in just a moment when we get into deploying Red Hat OpenShift. The next thing you're going to need is to set up Azure Directory Service Principal from the Azure portal. That's used for role-based access control. When we deploy the application in part two of this recording, that is used to actually connect the MySQL database to the Red Hat OpenShift instance. The next thing we're going to do is create a Red Hat Container Registry Service account. And this allows us to access the container registry that we're going to use to download OpenShift. And the secret is what you do to authenticate, so you can download that as well. So there's two parts to it, the container registry and the secret. All right, so once you've got all that, we can deploy JBoss EAP on Red Hat OpenShift from the Azure portal. To do that, we'll go to the Azure portal, portal.azure.com, and you search for JBoss EAP. Up near the top, there'll be some results. You want the JBoss EAP on Azure Red Hat OpenShift Marketplace offering. The Marketplace offering sets up a Azure Red Hat OpenShift cluster. It uses something called the JBoss EAP operator, which is something that Microsoft, in conjunction with Red Hat, created to make it easier to deploy OpenShift on top of Azure. You're going to have a getting started application, which is optional, but we're going to actually set up a separate application to show you how to set up your own applications when you're ready. And there is a virtual network and subnet that gets set up as a relation to that as well. All right, so let's go ahead and create that. So the first thing you do is create a resource group. I'm going to name mine a new one called JBEAP on ARO. And as you can see here, it's okay, it's available, so that's great. And I'm going to use for a location East US. Inside of aka.ms/jbosseap on ARO is a link to locations that Red Hat OpenShift is available in. You want to choose a location that has both Red Hat OpenShift available and also has capacity for MySQL. Not every location has Red Hat OpenShift available, so keep that in mind. I know that East US does, and I know that it also has some MySQL capacity for my subscription because I use a lot of MySQL, so sometimes I don't have capacity to use it. So East US is a good one for me. You'll find that you might run into the same sorts of things. Definitely check out that link and make sure you're choosing the right location. Next, you set up your pull secret. That is a large text file that you're going to download when you set up your pull secret as part of the prerequisites. And then you're going to set up two things here, a client ID, it's actually an application ID, and a client secret. So we paste in the client ID and then the secret. One tip, there is an application ID and a client secret ID that are created as part of the prerequisites. Use the application ID, not the client secret ID, and use the client secret when you get to this part as well. So make sure you don't put the client ID in here. Make sure you put the application ID. Next, we're not going to choose to deploy a sample application, but we could if we wanted to. You could do your own application or another. We're going to set up MySQL and an application separately just to show you all the steps, because that's what you're going to need to know when you deploy your own application onto Azure Red Hat OpenShift. So I'm going to say no to that. Then we say review and create. Create. Budget some time for this deployment to take place. It's doing a lot of things, so it actually takes a fair amount of time to deploy all the different components and make sure that everything's working properly. We'll verify that everything's working properly after the deployment. Through the magic of recording technology, it's only going to look like a moment, but it's much longer, so please budget for that time. So the message now is your deployment is complete. We go to the resource group, and we're going to pin that to the dashboard in portal.azure.com so we can see what was deployed. We got an ARO cluster, a virtual network. We've got a deployment script for JBoss for setup, and we've got a managed identity that's going to be used to connect OpenShift into other Azure services. The next thing we want to do is actually verify the installation. So we go back to the quick start, and we'll go down to these are all the instructions. We're going to skip over the MySQL. We're going to do that in part 2 of this recording. For this one, we are just making sure that the deployment is working and that Red Hat is okay. So to do that, we're going to go to the portal, and we're going to click on the resource group, go down to deployments, and click on the Red Hat OpenShift deployment. In outputs, we're going to choose this command, and you're going to paste that into your CLI. I won't do it right now because it reveals the credentials that you have for your Kubernetes cluster that's on Red Hat OpenShift. But the next thing you want to do is you want to copy the console URL. You're going to use those credentials from this command to log into this console. So you create a new tab and paste in the credentials. You'll get a login screen, which I already logged in. This is the first screen you come to. Go to Operators, Installed Operators, and you can see here that the JBoss EAP operator has installed correctly and succeeded and is up to date. That's what you need to do to just verify that the deployment is correct. So we've got now a resource group with a Red Hat OpenShift cluster, a virtual network, and some other things. Plus, we've verified that the JBoss EAP operator is running and ready to go. Next thing we want to do is set up a MySQL database using a Azure MySQL service. And then we're going to connect a deployed application to that MySQL service. That's going to be in part 2 of this recording. This concludes part 1. Please check out all the details at aka.ms/JBossEAP on ARO, and we'll see you in part 2.